Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. The highway stretched endlessly before them, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the heartland of America. In the passenger seat, Annika gazed out the window, her thoughts drifting between the landscape rushing by and the memories that seemed to blur together like the passing scenery. "You okay, sweetie?" her mother asked, glancing over with a soft smile. Annika nodded, tucking a strand of her chestnut hair behind her ear. "Yeah, just thinking." The car hummed beneath them, carrying them steadily eastward. With each mile marker that flashed by, Annika felt the weight of her past growing lighter, replaced by a tentative hope for what lay ahead. Her mother reached over, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "I know this move is a big change, but I think it'll be good for us. A fresh start." Annika returned the smile, though her heart fluttered with a mix of excitement and apprehension. A fresh start indeed, one where she could finally be herself, wholly and completely. As they drove, Annika's mind wandered back to her childhood, the discomfort she'd felt in her own skin, the confusion that had plagued her for years. She remembered the first time she'd tried on a dress in secret, how right it had felt despite the fear that had gripped her. The memories flowed like a montage. Stolen moments of painting her nails, practicing makeup tutorials in the dark of night, the ache of having to pretend day after day. But there were bright spots, too. Her mother's unwavering support when Annika finally found the courage to come out, the relief of starting hormone therapy, the joy of hearing her new name spoken aloud. Now, at 22, Annika was ready to embrace her true self fully. The move back to the East Coast represented more than just a change of scenery. It was a chance to start over in a place where no one knew her past. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, Annika's mother pulled into a rest stop. "Let's stretch our legs for a bit," she suggested, killing the engine. They climbed out of the car, the warm evening air enveloping them. Annika took a deep breath, savoring the scent of summer grass and distant rain. Her mother wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I'm proud of you, you know that?" Annika leaned into the embrace, feeling a lump form in her throat. "Thanks, Mom. For everything?" They stood there for a moment, watching the sunset in comfortable silence. As they made their way back to the car, Annika felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she could face them with her head held high. The next morning found them pulling into the driveway of their new home, a quaint 2-story house with a wraparound porch and shuttered windows. Annika stepped out of the car, taking in the sight of the tree-lined street and the distant sound of kids playing. "Well, here we are," her mother announced, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "Home sweet home." Annika nodded, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. This was it, the beginning of their new life. As they began unloading the car, a voice called out from across the street. "Hey there, neighbors!" A woman with curly black hair and a warm smile was making her way towards them, a plate of something in her hands. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said as she approached. "I'm Solana. I brought over some cookies, an old family recipe." Annika's mother's eyes widened in recognition. "Solana? Solana Martinez? Is that really you?" Solana's smile grew even brighter. "Oh my God, Katie, I can't believe it!" The two women embraced, laughing and talking over each other in their excitement. Annika stood by, watching the reunion with curiosity. "Annika, this is Solana. We were best friends in high school," her mother explained. "Solana, this is my daughter, Annika." Solana turned to Annika, her eyes warm and welcoming. "It's wonderful to meet you, Annika. Your mom and I have so many stories. Remind me to tell you about the time we snuck into the principal's office and—" Okay, Katie interrupted with a laugh. "Let's not corrupt my daughter just yet." Annika couldn't help but smile, already feeling more at ease in their new surroundings. "Well, I won't keep you from unpacking," Solana said. "But please come over for dinner once you're settled. I'd love to catch up properly." As Solana headed back across the street, Annika and her mother shared a look of pleasant surprise. "Small world, huh?" Katie mused. Annika nodded, feeling a spark of hope. Maybe this move would turn out even better than she'd dared to imagine. The next few days were a whirlwind of unpacking, arranging furniture, and getting to know their new home. Annika found herself drawn to the bay window in her bedroom, spending hours perched on the window seat, watching the neighborhood come to life around her. It was from this vantage point that she first saw him, a boy about her age, slouched and scowling as he kicked a rock down the sidewalk. There was something in his demeanor that caught Annika's attention, a familiar sort of discomfort that she recognized all too well. Later that week, as Annika and her mother were getting ready for dinner at Solana's, Katie brought up the boy Annika had seen. "That's Solana's son, Brody," she explained as she applied her lipstick. "Apparently, he's been having a tough time lately. Solana's hoping we might be able to help him feel more comfortable here." Annika nodded, a mix of curiosity and apprehension swirling in her stomach. She knew all too well how it felt to be uncomfortable in your own skin, to feel like you didn't quite fit in the world around you. As they crossed the street to Solana's house, Annika took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever the evening might bring. Solana greeted them warmly, ushering them into a cozy living room filled with the aroma of home-cooked food. "Brody," Solana called up the stairs, "our guests are here." There was a muffled response, followed by the sound of reluctant footsteps. A moment later, Brody appeared at the top of the stairs, his face a mask of forced neutrality. Annika studied him carefully. He was dressed in baggy jeans and an oversized hoodie, his hair falling in his eyes. But it was the way he carried himself that really caught her attention. The slight hunch of his shoulders, the way his eyes darted around the room, never quite meeting anyone's gaze. "Hi," Brody mumbled, barely loud enough to hear. Solana sighed, shooting an apologetic look at Katie and Annika. "Brody, why don't you show Annika around while I finish up in the kitchen?" Brody shrugged, turning without a word and heading back upstairs. After a moment's hesitation, Annika followed. The upstairs hallway was lined with framed photos, Solana and Brody through the years, always smiling, always together. But as Annika looked closer, she noticed a change in Brody's expression in the more recent photos. The easy smile of childhood had been replaced by something more guarded, more withdrawn. Brody led her to a room at the end of the hall, pushing open the door to reveal a typical teenage boy's bedroom. Posters on the walls, clothes strewn about, a desk cluttered with school books and a laptop. "So, this is my room," Brody said, his voice flat. Annika nodded, trying to think of something to say that might break the ice. Her eyes landed on a guitar propped in the corner. "You play?" Brody's eyes flickered to the instrument, a hint of something, pride, passion, breaking through his sullen exterior. "Yeah, a little." "That's cool," Annika said, genuinely interested. "I always wanted to learn, but I never had the patience." Brody shrugged again, but Annika could see he was warming up slightly. "It's not that hard once you get the basics down." They lapsed into silence again, but it felt less uncomfortable this time. Annika took a chance, deciding to be direct. "Look, I know it's weird having strangers in your house, but I'm new here too, you know? Maybe we could, I don't know, be new together?" Brody looked at her then, really looked at her for the first time. There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. Before he could respond, Solana's voice floated up from downstairs, calling them to dinner. As they made their way back down, Annika couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Brody than met the eye. She resolved to try and get to know him better, to see if she could help him the way others had helped her. Dinner was a lively affair, with Solana and Katie reminiscing about their high school days and sharing stories that had Annika laughing despite herself. Brody remained quiet for the most part, but Annika noticed him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. As the evening wound down, Solana turned to Annika with a warm smile. "It's been so wonderful having you here, Annika. I hope you'll feel free to come over anytime. Maybe you and Brody could hang out sometime?" Brody's head snapped up, a look of panic flashing across his face before he quickly schooled his features back into neutrality. Annika, sensing his discomfort, quickly jumped in. "That would be great. Maybe we could jam sometime, Brody. You could show me some guitar basics." Brody looked at her, surprise evident in his eyes. After a moment, he gave a small nod. "Yeah, maybe." As Annika and her mother said their goodbyes and headed back across the street, Annika couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. She'd seen something in Brody, a pain, a struggle that she recognized all too well. Maybe, just maybe, she could help him find his way, the way others had helped her. Over the next few weeks, Annika settled into life in their new town. She found a job at a local bookstore, relishing the quiet hours surrounded by stories and the occasional interaction with customers. In her free time, she explored the town, discovering hidden gems like a cozy coffee shop with the best lattes she'd ever tasted and a small park with a pond where she liked to sit and sketch. But despite her growing comfort in her new surroundings, Annika couldn't shake her concern for Brody. She'd seen him a few times since that first dinner, always from a distance, slouching down the street with his hands shoved in his pockets, or sitting alone on his front porch, strumming his guitar with a faraway look in his eyes. One Saturday afternoon, as Annika was curled up in her window seat with a book, she spotted Brody across the street. He was pacing back and forth in front of his house, his body language radiating frustration and distress. Without really thinking about it, Annika found herself heading downstairs and out the front door. As she approached, Brody looked up, his eyes wide with surprise and something that looked a lot like fear. "Hey," Annika said softly, stopping a few feet away. "Everything okay?" Brody opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, shaking his head. "Do you want to talk about it?" Annika offered, carefully keeping her tone casual. For a long moment, Brody just stared at her, his internal struggle clear on his face. Then, to Annika's surprise, he nodded. "Not here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can we go somewhere?" Annika nodded, understanding the need for privacy all too well. "Sure. How about the park? There's a quiet spot by the pond." Brody agreed, and they set off in silence. Annika could feel the tension radiating off him, could see the way his hands shook slightly as they walked. When they reached the park, Annika led them to a secluded bench partially hidden by a weeping willow. They sat, the gentle lapping of the pond providing a soothing backdrop. For a while, neither of them spoke. Annika waited patiently, knowing from experience how hard it could be to find the right words. Finally, Brody took a deep, shuddering breath. I don't know how to say this." Annika turned to face him, her expression open and encouraging. "It's okay. Take your time." Brody stared down at his hands, which were twisting nervously in his lap. I don't feel right. In my own skin, I mean. It's like I'm wearing a costume all the time, and it doesn't fit, and I can't take it off." Annika felt her heart skip a beat, a surge of empathy and understanding washing over her. She knew exactly what Brody was trying to say, had felt those same feelings herself for so many years. "Brody," she said gently, "are you trying to tell me that you think you might be transgender?" Brody's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. Is that what this is? I mean, I've read stuff online, but I didn't know if..." Annika nodded, her own eyes filling with tears of compassion. "It sounds like it might be, and Brody, if that is the case, I want you to know that it's okay. You're not alone, and there's nothing wrong with you." Brody's shoulders sagged, as if a great weight had been lifted. How did you know?" Annika took a deep breath, steeling herself. This was it, the moment of truth. "Because I've been there, Brody. I'm trans too. Brody's eyes widened even further, a look of awe and relief spreading across his face. You? You are? But you're so... I never would have guessed. Annika smiled softly. That's kind of the point. I've been living as my true self for a few years now. It hasn't always been easy, but it's been worth it. Brody nodded slowly, processing this information. So, what do I do now? Annika reached out, gently placing her hand on Brody's arm. Well, that's up to you. There's no rush, no right or wrong way to do this. But if you want, I can help you figure things out. We can take it one step at a time. Brody looked at her, tears shimmering in his eyes. I'd like that. I'm scared, but I think I need to do this to be me. Annika squeezed his arm gently. You're incredibly brave, you know that? And I promise you it gets better. It really does. As they sat there by the pond, the afternoon sun filtering through the willow branches, Annika felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in a long time. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy for Brody, but she was determined to be there for him every step of the way. In the weeks that followed, Annika and Brody grew closer, bonding over their shared experiences and the challenges they faced. Annika became a mentor of sorts, guiding Brody through the early stages of his transition with patience and understanding. One afternoon, they sat in Brody's room, surrounded by a pile of clothes Annika had brought over, items she'd outgrown or no longer wore, but thought might suit Brody's emerging style. Okay, so remember, Annika said, holding up a flowy blouse, there's no pressure to wear anything you're not comfortable with. This is all about exploring and finding what feels right for you. Brody nodded, his eyes wide as he took in the array of feminine clothing spread out before him. He reached out tentatively, running his fingers over the soft fabric of a sweater. It's a lot, he admitted, his voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. Annika smiled encouragingly. I know, but we'll take it slow, okay? Why don't you start by trying on this? She handed him a simple t-shirt dress in a soft shade of green. Brody took it, his hands trembling slightly. I'll step out while you change, Annika offered, moving towards the door. Take your time, and remember, there's no right or wrong way to do this. A few minutes later, Brody's voice called out softly, Okay, I'm ready. Annika re-entered the room to find Brody standing in front of the mirror, tugging nervously at the hem of the dress. The transformation was subtle but striking, the soft lines of the dress highlighting a femininity that had always been there, just beneath the surface. Wow, Annika breathed, her heart swelling with pride and affection. Brody, you look amazing. Brody turned, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I feel amazing. Is this what it's supposed to feel like? Annika nodded, her own eyes misting over. That feeling? That's you! The real you! Brody looked back at the mirror, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The real me, he repeated softly, as if testing out the words. They spent the rest of the afternoon experimenting with different outfits, Annika offering advice on fit and style, while Brody gradually grew more confident in expressing his true self. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the bedroom window, Brody turned to Annika with a determined look in his eyes. I think I want to tell my mom, he said, his voice wavering slightly, about all of this. Annika nodded, feeling a surge of pride at Brody's courage. That's a big step. How do you think she'll react? Brody shrugged, uncertainty clouding his features. I don't know. She's always been supportive, but this is different. Well, Annika said, reaching out to squeeze Brody's hand reassuringly. Whatever happens, I'll be here for you. And remember, your mom loves you. That's not going to change, no matter what. Brody nodded, taking a deep breath. Will you be there when I tell her? I don't think I can do it alone. Of course, Annika replied without hesitation. Whenever you're ready, I'll be right by your side. The next evening found Annika, Brody, and Solana gathered in the living room. The air was thick with tension, Brody fidgeting nervously on the couch, while Solana looked between him and Annika with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Mom," Brody began, his voice barely above a whisper. I need to tell you something." Solana leaned forward, her face etched with worry. "What is it, sweetie? You know you can tell me anything." Brody glanced at Annika, who gave him an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, he turned back to his mother. I'm transgender, Mom. I'm a girl." The words hung in the air for a moment, Solana's eyes widening as she processed what she'd just heard. Then, without a word, she stood and crossed the room, wrapping Brody in a fierce hug. "Oh, my sweet child," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for trusting me with this. I love you so, so much." Brody broke down then, years of pent-up fear and uncertainty pouring out in heaving sobs as Solana held him close. Annika watched, her own eyes brimming with tears, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for the love and acceptance she was witnessing. As Brody's tears subsided, Solana pulled back slightly, cupping her child's face in her hands. "So," she said, a watery smile spreading across her face. "Do you have a name picked out? Something you'd like me to call you?" Brody looked surprised, as if this hadn't even occurred to him yet. I hadn't thought about it," he admitted. "Well, there's no rush," Solana assured him. "You take all the time you need to figure it out, and in the meantime, we'll take this one day at a time, okay? Whatever you need, whatever support you want, I'm here." Brody nodded, a look of relief and love shining in his eyes. "Thanks, Mom. I was so scared to tell you." Solana pulled him close again. "You never have to be scared to tell me anything. You're my child, and I love you unconditionally. Always." As the evening wore on, the three of them talked late into the night. Solana asked questions, eager to understand and support her child in every way possible. Annika shared her own experiences, offering insights and advice for the journey ahead. By the time Annika headed home, the first hints of dawn were starting to lighten the sky. As she crossed the street, she felt a profound sense of joy and purpose. She had found not just a friend in Brody, but a kindred spirit, someone she could guide and support through the challenges she herself had faced. In the weeks that followed, Brody, who had chosen the name Brooke, began to blossom. With Annika's guidance and Solana's unwavering support, she started to explore her identity more openly. One sunny afternoon, Annika and Brooke sat cross-legged on Brooke's bed, an array of makeup spread out before them. "Okay," Annika said, holding up a tube of mascara. "The key with this is to go slow and steady. It takes some practice, but you'll get the hang of it." Brooke nodded, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "I've watched so many tutorials online, but actually doing it's kind of intimidating." Annika smiled reassuringly. "That's totally normal. Here, why don't I do one eye, and then you can try the other." Thanks for watching. Check out Patreon if you want to have early access to the other parts. If not, it will be online in a couple of days.